What if you could cool your home by 30 degrees without electricity or air conditioning? In the scorching desert city of Yazd, a centuries-old tower kept an entire house remarkably cool, using nothing but natural airflow and clever design. In this video, you'll discover the forgotten cooling technology that makes a house breathe on its own, why it still outperforms many modern systems, and how its principles can be applied today. In the desert city of Yazd, on a windless afternoon in the summer of 1973, an American engineer named Mehdi Ghiabaklo stood inside a 600-year-old merchant's house while the thermometer on the outer wall read 109 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, in the room directly beneath the tower, his own instrument read 79, 30 degrees of cooling, no electricity, no water pump, no moving part of any kind, just a tall mud brick chimney rising out of the roof, hollow, divided into shafts, open to a sky that hadn't produced a breath of wind in 6 hours. He wrote in his field notes that the air moving across his face was not only cool, but actively flowing, pulling, as if the house itself were breathing. He could not explain it. The building had no machinery, and yet it was running. That tower has a name. The Persians call it a badjir, which translates almost poetically to wind catcher. The merchants of Yazd had been building them since before Columbus sailed, and the thing about that house in 1973 is that it was not special. There were thousands of them, an entire city in the central Iranian desert, one of the hottest inhabited places on the surface of the earth, where summer temperatures routinely break 110, had been kept livable for 6 centuries by a piece of architecture that costs, in modern materials, about $22 to replicate. No compressor, no refrigerant, no monthly bill. And the reason you have never heard of it, the reason it is not sitting on top of every house in Phoenix and Las Vegas and Austin, has nothing to do with whether it works. It works. It has always worked. It has to do with the fact that nobody on earth can sell you a recurring service contract for a hollow brick tower that runs on nothing and lasts 500 years. Let me show you exactly how it works, why the physics is older than the country you live in, and how you can build a scaled version of the same system on your own roof this month for the price of a single dinner out. Because once you understand what the merchants of Yazd understood, the $300 you hand your power company every July starts to look less like a necessity and more like a tax you agreed to pay without ever reading the fine print. The science begins with a problem that sounds impossible. How do you move air through a house when there is no wind? A fan needs electricity. A breeze needs weather. But the badjir needs neither, and to understand why, you have to understand that the Persians were not catching wind at all. That was a misunderstanding baked into the very name. They were exploiting two forces that are always present, day and night, wind or no wind. Temperature difference and pressure difference. These forces never stop. They are running right now, over your head while you read this. Here is the first one. Hot air rises. Everyone knows this, but almost nobody has ever weaponized it the way the badjir does. The tower is tall, often 20, 30, 40 feet above the roofline, and it is built from thick mud brick, which heats slowly and holds temperature. During the day, the sun strikes one face of the tower. The air inside that sun-warmed shaft heats up, becomes less dense, and begins to climb. As it climbs and exits the top of the tower, it leaves behind a low-pressure zone at the base, and nature does not tolerate low pressure. Air from inside the house, and from the cool, shaded shafts on the other side of the same tower, rushes in to fill it. The tower has become an engine. It has converted nothing but sunlight, and the simple, stubborn refusal of air to leave a vacuum into a continuous current of moving air through the living space below. The engineers who studied this at the University of Tehran in the 1970s gave it a name, the solar chimney effect. The Persians just called it summer. Now here is where it gets interesting, and here is where the modern HVAC industry would prefer you stopped reading. Moving air is not the same as cooling air. A fan moves air and cools nothing. It just makes you feel cooler by evaporating sweat off your skin. The Bajir does something the fan cannot. It actually drops the temperature of the air before it ever reaches you, and it does it in two ways that cost nothing. The first way is thermal mass. The shaded shafts of the tower and the long internal channels the air travels through are built from dense mud brick that stays cool through the heat of the day, the same way the stone floor of an old church stays cold in August. As outside air is pulled down through the shaded shaft, it surrenders its heat to those cool walls. By the time it reaches the room below, it has already given up several degrees. This is the exact same principle as the buried earth pipe, air losing heat to a cool mass, except the Persians stood it up vertically and let it run on sun instead of soil. The second way is the one that turns 30 degrees of cooling into something that feels like a miracle, and it is the reason the Bajir works best precisely in the climates where you need it most. In the great houses of Yazd and Kashan, the incoming shaft did not pull air over dry brick. It pulled air down across an underground water channel, a qanat, or over a simple basin of water, or through a chamber hung with wet reeds. When dry desert air passes over water, the water evaporates. And evaporation is not a metaphor for cooling. It is cooling, in the most literal thermodynamic sense. It takes roughly 580 calories of heat energy to evaporate a single gram of water, and the energy is pulled directly out of the passing air. The air arrives at your skin not just moved, not just shaded, but genuinely, measurably colder, often by 15 to 20 additional degrees in dry climates. Combine the chimney draft, the thermal mass, and the evaporative chamber, and a 40-degree drop on the hottest day of the year is not a legend. It is arithmetic. It is the arithmetic the merchants of Yazd ran by instinct 600 years before the first electric compressor was ever switched on. You can read the numbers yourself. They are not hidden. In 2015, a team of researchers published a study in the journal Energy in Buildings measuring a traditional Yazd wind tower against a controlled baseline. The tower dropped incoming air by an average of 12 degrees Celsius, that is roughly 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Using a draft velocity the researchers clocked at over 2 meters per second, on a day with no measurable ambient wind at ground level. Zero wind, and the tower was still pulling a steady current of cool air into the room below. The energy input was, and I want to be precise here, nothing. Not almost nothing. Nothing. There was no fan. There was no pump. The only energy in the entire system was the sunlight hitting the outside of a brick tower, which the tower was going to receive whether anyone used it or not. For comparison, the high-efficiency central air conditioner that a salesman would love to install in your home this summer carries a price tag somewhere north of $6,000, consumes between 3,000 and 5,000 watts while running, and has a working life, if you are lucky, if you maintain it, if the refrigerant holds, of about 15 years before it becomes scrap. The wind towers of Yazd have been running for 600. Some of the oldest are estimated to be among the most enduring functional cooling devices ever constructed by human beings, and the maintenance schedule across 6 centuries amounts to occasionally patching the brick. That is the comparison the industry does not want made out loud. One device costs $6,000 and dies in 15 years. The other costs $22 in modern materials, runs on sunlight, and outlives the person who built it by 400 years. The Persians figured this out the way every great piece of vernacular engineering gets figured out. $6. This is where the $22 figure comes from, and it is not a marketing number. It is a materials list. If you have made it this far into the video, you have already absorbed more genuine building physics than most homeowners pick up in a lifetime of watching home improvement television. And if you want the complete blueprint, the exact shaft dimensions for every climate zone, the dual channel ratios that maximize draft, the water wicking geometry that keeps the pad damp with zero electricity, the orientation tables for catching your region's prevailing summer wind, and 17 other forgotten desert and off-grid systems for cooling, water, and food preservation that the utility companies would very much prefer you never learned about. All of it is laid out step by step, measurement by measurement in the manual. The link is in the description below this video. You can have the entire thing tonight and start building this weekend. Now, let us talk about the objections, because if you search the internet for evaporative cooling right now, you will find people insisting it does not work, and almost every one of those complaints traces back to one of three mistakes. And understanding them is the difference between a tower that transforms your summer and a box that does nothing. The first mistake is using it in the wrong climate without adjustment. Evaporative cooling, the water stage, works spectacularly in dry air and weakly in humid air, because air that is already saturated with moisture cannot absorb much more. In Phoenix, Las Vegas, Albuquerque, El Paso, eastern Colorado, the dry air evaporative bajir is nothing short of magical, dropping 105-degree air into the low 70s with a humidity the desert barely notices. In Houston or New Orleans, the water stage alone underperforms. But here is what the complainers miss: the chimney draft and the thermal mass cooling work in every climate on Earth, wind or no wind, wet or dry. In a humid climate, you simply lean on the draft and the cool mass shaft and skip or reduce the evaporative chamber, and you still get a continuous flow of moving, shaded air through your home for free. The Persians built water stage towers because they lived in a desert. You build for the climate you actually have. The second mistake is building a single channel shaft. People put up one hollow tube, get a feeble trickle of air, and declare the whole concept a myth. The dual channel design, hot driving shaft, and cool delivery shaft is not optional. It is the engine. Without the sun-heated exhaust side creating suction, you are relying on whatever breeze happens to wander past, which on a still day is nothing. 2 channels. Write it down. The third mistake, and the most common, is building the tower too short. The chimney effect scales with height. A 2-foot stub on the roof generates almost no draft and disappoints everyone who builds it. The same design at 10 feet of rise pulls a steady, satisfying current you can feel on your skin. If you are going to cut a corner somewhere, do not cut it on height. Height is the free multiplier. Every foot you add above the roofline increases the pressure differential that drives the entire system, and it costs you nothing but a few more feet of lumber. There is one more objection worth addressing, which is the question people always raise about anything this old. If it is so good, why did we abandon it? And the honest answer is the same answer that explains why earth pipes and root cellars and a dozen other genuinely brilliant pre-industrial technologies vanished from American homes. They were not defeated on merit. They were defeated on profit. A bajir generates no recurring revenue. There is no refrigerant to recharge, no compressor to replace, no filter to sell you every 3 months, no technician who comes out twice a year to inspect it and charge $120, no firmware, no app, no monthly subscription to a thermostat that watches you. From the perspective of the modern home services economy, the wind tower is an extinction event. It eliminates an entire category of recurring profit, so nobody advertises it. Nobody builds new homes with it. The building codes do not even acknowledge it exists. When mechanical air conditioning arrived in America, it did not win because it cooled better. In the dry Southwest, it often cooled worse and cost a fortune to run. It won because someone could sell it, finance it, service it, and bill you for it every single month for the rest of your life. The Bajir asks for $22 once and then quietly works for 5 centuries, and there is no business model on earth built around that. So if it works, and it costs almost nothing, and it has been proven across 600 years and confirmed by modern research, the only thing standing between you and free cooling is a weekend of building. And before you start, there are a few details I deliberately held back until exactly this point in the video, because they only matter once you have already decided you are going to do this. And if you have made it this far, you have decided. I can tell. So let me give you the 4 refinements that separate a tower that works for 30 years from a box that disappoints you in one summer. The first detail is orientation, and this is where most amateur builds quietly lose half their performance. The 2 channels of your tower are not interchangeable. The hot driving shaft, the one that creates the suction, wants maximum sun, which in the northern hemisphere means the west and south faces that absorb the brutal afternoon heat. The cool intake shaft wants the opposite. It should draw from the shaded north or east side, ideally from the coolest, most protected air you can find, behind a hedge, under a tree, anywhere the incoming air has not already been preheated by direct sun before it enters the system. The Persians oriented their towers with obsessive care toward the summer wind direction, the one they called the blessed breeze. And even in a windless system, the principle holds: heat the exhaust, shade the intake, and never let them trade places. A tower built backwards, intake in the sun, exhaust in the shade, will run weakly in reverse and pump warm air into your house, and the builder will never understand why. The second detail is the water management, and it is the same trap that ruins evaporative systems everywhere. The wicking pad must stay damp, but never flooded, and the water must be kept moving or refreshed, because standing water in a warm, dark chamber does exactly what standing water always does. It grows things you do not want to breathe. The Persian Kenat water was constantly flowing, fresh and cold, which solved the problem invisibly. Your replica needs either a small reservoir you refill and flush regularly, or a slow drip that keeps the pad wet and the basin turning over. A few drops of the same approach used in any swamp cooler, keeping the water fresh, draining the basin periodically, and you will run for years with clean air. Neglect it, let the basin stagnate, and you will turn a cooling system into a problem. Fresh water, damp pad, never a stagnant pool. That is the entire water maintenance schedule. The third detail is the screen, and it costs about $6 and saves you from a genuinely unpleasant discovery. The top of your tower is an open shaft pointed at the sky, which to every bird, wasp, spider, and rodent within a quarter mile reads as a luxury hotel with the door propped open. They will move in, they will nest, and then you will be pumping their leavings into your living room. A simple 1/4 inch galvanized hardware cloth screen across both the intake opening and the tower top, secured with the stainless hose clamp, keeps every vertebrate and most insects out for the life of the system. Above it, a basic rain cap of the kind sold for chimney terminations keeps storm water from pouring down your cool shaft. $6, 15 minutes, and you never think about it again. The fourth detail, and the last one I want to give you before you go, is the exhaust path inside the house. because a tower can only pull cool air in as fast as warm air can leave. This is the part nearly everyone forgets. The bajir is one half of a loop. The cool air it delivers has to displace the warm air already in the room, and that warm air needs somewhere to go. An upper window cracked open, a high vent, a second shaft, a stairwell rising to an open upstairs. The Persians built their houses around this principle, with high openings and central courtyards that let the displaced warm air escape upward while the tower fed cool air in from below. In your home, the rule is simple: low and cool in, high and warm out. Give the hot air an exit near the ceiling on the far side of the room, and the whole system accelerates, the draft strengthens, and the cool current pours in faster. Seal the room tight with no exit, and even a perfectly built tower will stall, because you have asked it to push air into a box that has no room left to hold it. That is the complete system. A tall dual-channel shaft, a damp wicking pad standing in fresh water, a screened cap, the right orientation, and an exit for the warm air to leave. The merchants of Yazd worked it out by hand 600 years ago in a desert that did not forgive mistakes. The researchers confirmed every number of it in a laboratory in 2015, and the only reason it is not already on your roof is that nobody can bill you for it every month. The very first time you stand in a room on a 105-degree afternoon and feel a steady current of air 15, 20, 30 degrees cooler than the world outside pouring down out of a tower that is connected to nothing. No wire, no pipe, no meter. You will understand something the merchants of Yazd understood 600 years ago, and that your power company would very much prefer you never figure out. The infrastructure of modern comfort is a choice. It was made for you before you were born by people who profit from your continued participation in it. And the alternative is not some primitive sacrifice. The alternative is a hollow tower, a damp pad, and a weekend of building. So before you close this video, do one thing for me. Go up to your roof or stand in your yard and look at it, and find the spot where a tower could rise. Picture it catching the sun. Picture the cool air pouring down into the room below while the meter on the side of your house slows to a crawl in the middle of August. That picture is not a fantasy. It is a weekend of work and $22 in materials away. The full blueprint, with every dimension and every refinement, is waiting in the description below. Go build it. And the next time the grid goes down in your neighborhood during a heat wave, you will be the only house on the block that stays cool, and the only one that never even notices the power is out.